Hello, everybody. Welcome to the I Didn't Like the Ending podcast. I'm your host, Sara Van Brocklin, and today we have a guest. This is Sophie.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course. Podcast 2.0 with me.
I know. The last one that we recorded was, we're going to splice them in maybe, or maybe I'll show you all some of that another time, but...
A bonus app of just us laughing 6 inches away from each other's face.
We were trying so hard because I wanted to get an episode out, but...
At one point, she looked at me and she said my eyes were saying too much and that she couldn't focus. So
we were legit like talking. We were using one cam and we were talking this close to each other.
Webcam, to be clear, in front of a computer monitor. Yeah.
Yeah. It just wasn't
up close
working.
and personal.
Yeah. That was a beautiful moment, and I'm glad we're not doing that again, but
we'll
always have our memories. Yeah.
We'll always have our memories. We've reconvened.
It's been really good.
We've got a new story as opposed to the one we tried to tell last time.
Yeah. The new story is going to be interesting today. Let me pull it up because I was on the wrong paper. While I pull this up, we can just talk about like how we know each other.
Smile. We could just talk about how we know each other.
How did we meet?
How much into detail do you want to go?
I don't know. Full send.
Full send.
Full send.
I mean, you could always clip it out later if you don't.
It's true. I can't be like, that was a lot.
Technically, legally speaking, Sara is dating my ex-husband. Consciously uncoupled is the term you put it.
Yes. That's such a...
So we're still friends. It was a mutual ending. It was a good relationship, a good conscious uncoupling. So we're still friends. So I met Sara through my ex, and they're currently dating right now. And turns out I like her. Great choice. Ty. I don't know if you want to name drop, but too late now.
I know. And it's been really good ever since then. I feel like we have, I don't know, a lot of people would think that that's a red flag, that like someone who they're dating is still really good friends with their ex.
Yeah. And there were a few people before Ty dated you that were like, this is really weird, really toxic. I'm like... this is toxic?
Right.
The fact that we can be in the same room and have a conversation with each other and
I know.
At least, spend time together without screaming at each other. I've met some worse off exes.
Yeah, honestly. I wish that was the case for me, that I was able to remain friends with my exes. Honestly, it was a green flag for me.
That's good.
Yeah. I feel like you're very respectful. He's very respectful. And like we all hang out every Tuesday. We have a little family dinner.
The best.
It's so fun.
50-cent tacos. $3 tequila shots.
It is so good.
It's a good time.
Yeah, it really is.
Our regular waiter is the best.
Oh my gosh! Shout out to Blake.
Shout out Blake. He brings me my glass of water and my 4 tacos. I don't even have to ask.
Oh my gosh!
He knows.
He's so good. It was slow service last night because he wasn't there. He was sick.
Yeah. So, and you knew a bunch of people there when we were at the bar. Yeah. You like walked in and immediately somebody was like, Sara, hi.
I don't know if that's, starting to know everybody. Bar people. Yeah. No, it was just a different bar in the area that I knew from a mutual friend. Yeah.
You got a lot of friends.
Yeah, I will. I don't even know what to say about it, but, yeah, so last night when I first saw you, Tylen's over, he's like, Sophie has something to tell you. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, he likes to put people on the spot just as a tease, just to be funny.
Well, you want to tell them what happened?
The other day I'm ordering things on Amazon and Ty and I are still on the same Amazon Prime account, which we did determine I do pay for. Yeah. He tried to claim that it was his Amazon Prime account, not the truth. But I hopped on there to order some skincare stuff and I'm scrolling and all of a sudden I see this cute little like pajama set of some variety.
It was Valentine's Day recently.
I like liked how I described it to you in there because I was telling Sara the story and she looked really lost, and I was like, oh, it was like a, you know, something you might wear in the evening, a nighttime sleepwear set. And you immediately,
red.
You're like beet red. I'm like, okay, she got it now. So anyways, I see that on my Amazon Prime account and I'm like, oh shit, like did I accidentally order something? And I'm looking at it and then I click on the order confirmation and it says it's getting delivered to Ty's house. And I was like, what the? Oh, I'm like, that's not mine. So then the first thing I said to Ty last night, well, I told Luke, who's my partner, and I told Luke, I was like, oops, like probably saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And Luke was like, oh no. And we showed up and Luke goes, wow, I really didn't think you'd shoot straight out the gate with that. I walked up to Ty. I was like, so I saw your order on Amazon. Do you have a fun Valentine's Day?
Yes, we did.
Yes, you
Very
did.
fun.
It looks really cute.
Yeah.
And really comfy, too.
Yes.
It's a cute set.
It is a cute set.
So,
Thank you,
know.
Ty, for the Valentine's Day gift.
Yeah, shout out, Ty. Oh, no.
Yeah, so good. So hopefully every week we can have a fun new, maybe embarrassing, maybe not embarrassing, but just a fun new story.
Usually
there's something.
embarrassing.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it's typical.
But it's fun. We have a good time.
Yeah.
So as far as like any announcements go, I'm trying to get these episodes out to you at least twice a month. And then hopefully as we start doing more stories and gaining more traction, they can come out a little bit more, maybe on the weekly basis. But that's the goal for right now. So Sophie, you're new to true crime, kind of, right? Like you followed some stories. You want to give a little bit about your background and what your interest is as far as true crime goes?
For sure. So I've always been, I would describe it as kind of like a car crash situation where some stories I can't tear my eyes away from, like a lot of the, you know, big ones like the Gypsy Rose Blanchard story.
Yeah, that was wild.
And I can't remember their name right now, but there's a set of brothers that had that are currently incarcerated, and
The Lafferty brothers?
Yes. So
yes.
I know those stories, some of the bigger stories that pop up on TikTok and stuff. I have a tentative relationship with it because I do tend to get a little bit paranoid. But
That's fair.
otherwise, I have a background in anthropology. I have a bachelor's degree that I graduated recently with. And so I do like approaching these topics from more of a cultural level and understanding it from that perspective, because it helps me process the information more. Because while I don't want to trigger, you know, extreme paranoia, I caught myself like on the way over here. I was like, how many people do I share my location with? Because, you know, just in case anything happens, because you hear all the stories of all of the women and people who've gone through things. I'm like going through a checklist just because I've got true crime on the brain. I'm like, okay, so my location is shared with everybody. If I came over to your house, when I came over to your house the first time, I was like, okay, so this is a new place. Maybe I should send the address to Luke. Like, it's like, I get a little bit anxious about it all, but taking that bigger cultural perspective on it, you get a different understanding of like how, like today, the topic of like incarceration and what we're specifically talking about today, taking a bigger lens to it and understanding how larger media and cultural perspectives play a role on such a specific topic. It's very interesting. Yeah. And I do like true crime in that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to like start diving into some of this with you because it'll give some more discussion and some more insight. So I'm stoked that you're here.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, getting into the story. I did want to have a trigger warning. There is sexual assault of a minor, and we are going to be discussing suicide.
Okay.
And like mental health issues. So there's that for you. And then the sources today are from Wikipedia, Deseret News, Murderpedia, KSL TV, The New York Times, and newspapers.com. So we're going to get into our case.
Got it.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Sometimes criminals are never caught, and the people who are victimized, along with their family, never get to see justice. Sometimes criminals are caught, but only for some of the crimes that they've committed. Today is a great case for justice because a criminal who was already in prison for heinous crimes would eventually be caught for more crimes he committed, but all went under the radar, all because he couldn't stop boasting about it to other inmates.
Ooh.
The prison guards eventually caught wind of these stories and an investigation was opened. He ends up paying the ultimate price, his life. Roberto Arguelles was born February 14th, 1962 in Kearns, Utah, one of two brothers. For those of you who are not familiar with Utah, Kearns is a small town near Salt Lake City, Utah. And according to the 2020 census, Kearns has a population of around 36,000. And in the 1940s, there was a U.S. Army base built, but before that, the area just consisted of dry farms, land reserved for universities and colleges. So that's kind of what the setup is around the time. Little is publicly available and known about Roberto's childhood, but at an early age, his stepfather moved the family to a pig farm in Salt Lake City where he and his brother worked. It wasn't long after they moved to this pig farm that Roberto committed his first crime at age 15. He was trying to steal a car and was then placed on probation. His behavior only worsened after he was released. In June of 1978, he beat up his girlfriend, his brother, and his mother. At that point, he was sent to a youth shelter. Later that year, Roberto would commit his first known violent crime. He kidnapped and molested a 10-year-old girl. This time, Roberto would be placed under house arrest, which, unfortunately, he still had access to other family members and children.
Oh, no. What age is he at this point?
He's around 15.
He's around 15. So he commits his first crime at 15 and then is still 15 by the time this happens. So this happens all within the scope of his 15th year. That's wild.
Yeah. 1 month after this violent crime against a 10-year-old girl, he would be charged with molesting a 7-year-old. And this charge, sadly, would eventually be dropped. It wouldn't be until Roberto is just turning 17 years old in February of 1979 that he is charged with the rape of a 17-year-old girl. So when he went to court, he was then found guilty on both charges, one for the rape of the 17-year-old and the other charge of molesting the 10-year-old girl. And at that time, the recommendation was that he be detained until he is 21 years old. So he's creating a pattern right now of violent sex crimes. He's not even 17.
Yeah.
And the recommendation at that point is that he's detained, but only for 4 years. Sometimes we see in these cases that happened decades ago that there are some of these states, Utah's one of them, where sex crimes, unfortunately making up a large part of crimes, go unmonitored and not fully punished, if that's the right word to use in the legal system. I guess maybe not fully brought to justice is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
Because the law and the programs at the same time, they haven't necessarily caught up with one another. Roberto's case at this time is one of those situations. He was sent to the State Youth Development Center in Ogden. At that time, juvenile authorities had no therapy program that treated violent juvenile sex offenders. And because of this, they attempt to have Roberto transferred to the Utah State Hospital. The Utah State Hospital then rejects Roberto as a patient, saying that he was too unmotivated for treatment.
So their solution to not having a rehabilitation program for somebody who's performing these kinds of acts is to send him to a hospital. Is this like a psych portion of the hospital? What? I'm
not sure what it was, but I think that was along the lines like he's juvenile, violent sex crimes. This is a pattern. Maybe someone at the hospital can help him.
Psychological help. Yeah.
The Utah State Hospital rejects him. And then they have the idea of sending him to California. But when that failed because of lack of funds, Roberto is released in December of that year.
So he's just released. They didn't have any money to take him to California, so they just let him go.
Yeah, and within that 1 year, there was one condition of him being released, and that was that he attended periodic meetings with a sociology graduate student from the University of Utah, who not only was unaware of his violent past and pattern, but also untrained to deal with Roberto's violent tendencies.
That's incredibly... I don't even know what a word for that would be.
I know. So
a recent graduate, a sociology graduate.
Yeah.
That's not even... The concept of sociology has nothing to do with... He's just meeting with Roberto. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Because because I have an anthropology degree. Anthropology follows some similar, theories and lines of thought as sociology. And if you're just sending somebody with that history of violent crimes to just meet with a recent grad, that puts them in a hugely uncomfortable position, and also a really dangerous position if they don't know anything about that. That's awful.
Yeah, he's just some 17-year-old kid getting away with bad behavior, completely unmotivated, meeting with someone just like once a week, just trying to talk. I don't even know, trying to talk through. Like, it just seems so futile.
Yeah.
Futile. I don't know how you say that word.
Futile works. Say it however you want.
But yeah, it just I know that people are trying to do something, but this again, it was, the law and the programs, they just weren't on the same level in the 70s.
Yeah.
This decision is maddening. It's sickening, and Roberto deserved better with his treatment. And the families who went through the trauma inflicted on them by Roberto definitely deserve better.
Absolutely.
As the pattern usually is with sexual violent criminals being repeat offenders, this decision was absolutely insufficient and proved to be insufficient. Because within 3 months, on March 3rd of 1980, Roberto was driving around West Valley near Salt Lake City, canvassing the area for his next victim. He spots her. A 15-year-old girl is walking to school, and he pulls up next to her to offer her a ride. Except he drives her to a vacant field instead and sexually assaults her. After he finishes, he threatens to kill her if she told anyone, and then he takes her back to the high school and drops her off. 2 days later, Arguelles offers a ride to a 14-year-old girl walking to school. She had just moved into the neighborhood. It was to be her first day at the school. It was raining, so she accepted his offer, and he drove her to a dirt road near his stepfather's pig farm. She was looking out the window when she hears a click. She turns and sees him opening his pocket knife. He orders her to take off her clothes, to which she refused. He slashed her arm and repeated the order. She undressed at this point, and he rapes her. He ordered her out of his pickup truck, walked up behind her, and put a knife to her throat. She tried to push him away, but he threw her to the ground and stabbed her several times in the chest. What are you going to do, kill me? She screamed. He stopped stabbing her. She asked him again, what are you going to do? Leave me out here to die? He throws her back into his pickup truck, then drives her to a residential neighborhood where he dumps her body. Throat slashed, stab wounds all over her body. The junior high student, bravely and with all the strength she can muster, is somehow able to walk to a nearby house and call for help. After she was treated for her injuries, including one lung that collapsed, the girl was able to give a detailed description of her attacker and his truck, and her witness account would lead to Roberto's arrest. He confesses to both attacks and later pleads guilty to 2 counts of attempted murder, aggravated rape, and sexual abuse. At this point, he's transferred to the Utah State Prison to serve his sentence. And during the next 10 years, he would appeal multiple times for his parole, but it would be rejected by the concerned board members. But eventually, one of his appeals did work, and only 11 years after his sentence, he was paroled on June 25th, 1991.
Wow.
1 year later, he would again be out driving in West Valley, canvassing the schools for his next victims. He spotted 2 children in front of an elementary school. He approached them posing as a security guard and asked the children if they wanted to help him find some stolen goods. Under the pretense of frisking them, he ordered them to pull down their pants and grope them before dropping them off at their home. She was only 10 and he was only 8. 1 week later, he stopped in front of a high school where he spotted 2 10-year-old girls and, using a fake police badge, attempted to entice them into his car. This time, he was spotted by a highway worker who immediately called the police, arresting Arguelles shortly after. He was then charged with molesting the siblings from the elementary school, and Roberto is found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with possibility of parole.
They gave him a possibility of parole after all of this.
Which is wild because at the sentencing, it was Justice Kenneth Rigtrup is the one that sentenced him. He gave an explicit recommendation that the parole option hopefully should never be applied, citing Roberto's increasingly deviant sexual crimes. I'm like, why is there even a possibility of parole at that point if the judge is like, don't let him out. Like, I hope he doesn't get out.
Yeah, who makes that decision? If the judge himself recommends against that, who makes that decision that decides, hey, this is still going to be a possibility? We recommend against it, but here it still is.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
This is one of the most frustrating parts about some of these cases, especially decades ago. Well, and even currently, there are so many chances given to men who have shown repeated bad behavior, men and women, but repeated bad behavior. There is a pattern here. So he's in prison. Over the next 3 years, Roberto serves out his sentence in obscurity. Occasionally, he would brag to his cellmates about abusing young girls. As he got more comfortable telling his stories, Roberto dropped a bomb of information on his cellmates, something that he had kept secret for years. In the winter of 1992, while he was on parole, he went on a killing spree. He had murdered 1 woman and 3 teenage girls, and no one had ever caught him.
Whoa.
These claims eventually attracted the attention of the prison guards. Police investigators decided to interview him. In exchange for his confessions, Roberto asked for a private cell and a color TV.
In exchange?
There's always some deal that they're wanting to make. It's so gross.
That's awful.
And I think what's hard about this is I can understand the situation that some people are in, because if someone has information that can help families come to some comfort, or there can be still some justice. Like, I understand if people are willing to make a deal and if he's able to lead them to the bodies.
Yeah. How significant is this, benefit for him, quote unquote, when it could lead to healing some loss from other families? I totally agree. Like, whatever he wants, as opposed to, ignoring what he's saying or what stories he's telling, just so he doesn't get some sort of benefit. Yeah, it is a really difficult decision, though, to try and make when you don't want to celebrate somebody who's obviously trying to get props for, he's boasting about it to his cellmates, obviously. So he's trying to get some sort of props from his actions and his stories, and he thinks that, he deserves one thing or another, or is trying to barter with it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gross. So in the interview, Roberto confessed to the murders of 16-year-old Lisa Martinez and 15-year-old Tuesday Roberts. On March 30th, 1992, Lisa Martinez and Tuesday Roberts were walking to the Valley Fair Mall when they disappeared. At the time, police thought they were runaways. Roberto confessed that he offered Tuesday and her friend Lisa a ride to the mall. He handcuffed the girls together and tried to sexually assault Lisa. When she resisted, Roberto stabbed her to death with a wood chisel. Then he turned to attack Tuesday. He sexually assaulted her, then strangled her with a rope. In his confessions, he directed police to the grave sites near his stepfather's pig farm. Police spent days in the summer heat of July sifting through pig muck to dig up clues for the 2 homicides. Eventually, they found the girls' bodies right where Roberto indicated. Have you heard about pig farms?
Not much.
So apparently, pigs will eat anything.
Yeah.
And apparently, that's one of the ways that people try to hide murders, is by dumping bodies in a pig farm, because their genetic DNA is so close to ours, or human DNA.
Oh, I have heard that.
I'm actually surprised that they were able to find evidence in there, because I guess the pigs weren't fully able to get to them.
Yeah.
Pig farm is, if you hear someone talking about a pig farm, that's pretty sus.
Yeah. That's I got no words.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's uncomfortable.
A few months later, in a 7-hour confession, he broke down and confessed to 2 more killings. 13-year-old Stephanie Blundell, who was found in American Fort Canyon, sexually assaulted and stabbed to death. He also pleaded guilty to killing 42-year-old Margot Bond, a janitor at a junior high school where Roberto said he was hunting for girls. She had vanished en route to her job, only to be found 4 months later in Tooele County in a shallow grave near road tracks. She had been stabbed to death and sexually assaulted. Roberto was charged in all 4 deaths. Here's something unique about Roberto's case when he goes to court for those that I hadn't heard of often. Utah has the death penalty. When brought to trial in May of 1997, Arguelles announced his intention to plead guilty and waive his right to appeal the upcoming convictions, stressing that he wished to be executed.
So in court, he made it very clear he wanted to be executed.
Yeah, he wanted the death penalty.
Okay.
His attorneys criticized the entire trial, trying to plea ineffective counsel. When that didn't work, they tried to say that he suffered from blackouts and possibly had multiple personality disorder. So they're trying to say something is wrong with him. He's incapable. He's not fully responsible for these crimes.
Okay.
Roberto eventually decides to represent himself because he's like, no, I want the death penalty.
So he rejects what his attorneys are trying to do for him to divert responsibility. And he says, no, I want to take responsibility for all of this. And I would like the death penalty, please.
It was really wild. I don't know like what words he said as far as I want to take responsibility. Because I mean, I don't know about that. I just know that he was like,
well, okay, so maybe he's pleading guilty.
Yeah, for one reason or another. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, whether it was, I don't know whether he did feel guilty, whether it was consuming him. I'm not sure as far as that goes. Like he just wanted to die. Kind of bizarre.
Gotcha.
The judge grants this. And on June 21st, 1997, Roberto Arguelles was sentenced to death for the 4 murders, with his chosen method being the firing squad.
Okay.
Roberto would be the 3rd person executed by firing squad after Gary Gilmore in 1977 and John Albert Taylor in 1996. Use of a firing squad is also legal in Oklahoma and Idaho, but those states have never exercised the option. The procedure is simple and precise. Do you know much about how the firing squad works?
From what I understand, it's only one individual who has like a bullet in their gun, in their firearm, correct? But it's multiple. Is it 7 or 9? One of those?
Yeah, there's
just multiple people there. They don't know which individual has the bullet themselves. They don't know. And then it's just execution.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
In more detail, he wears a black jumpsuit with a white cloth pinned over his heart.
Okay.
So they want to shoot at the heart for a quick death. And a black hood is over his head. At the shouted command of ready aim fire, state-sanctioned riflemen would fire at the white cloth. And unusually, Robert requested that the traditional black cap that is put over the heads not be used. He wanted to see death coming.
That was a specific request he made. No cap over. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if he just wants to mess with them or if there's something going on with Roberto, but
yeah,
he was really wanting to just be done.
Yeah, it seems like he's got some sort of need for control in the situation. That's what it seems to me. Because if he's trying to, maybe he's accepted his fate, maybe he's accepted that this isn't something he wants to keep secret anymore, and so he has planned a way to have at least some control, given the fact that he's been incarcerated. So he wants the death penalty. He wants it this specific way. And then even up to the point of not wanting the hood on. That is interesting for sure.
And unusual.
I do find it interesting that they can choose what method of execution. I don't know if you know any details on like why we've decided that they are able to choose, because I don't know.
Whether it's execution or lethal injection or the electric chair, I think the choice in that is interesting as far as like how or why they're able to choose it, because the whole point though is the fact that the state decides when you die. And so you cannot die before they say that it's your time, which that'll come into play here really quickly.
Yeah.
So Roberto is officially on death row, and lawyers are still contending the decision, saying Roberto is incompetent. At this time, court-ordered competency evaluations begin because you can't constitutionally execute someone who is not competent. In the year 1998, Roberto was found unresponsive in his cell, hanging from a laundry bag.
Wow.
One of my sources says that people will try to kill themselves. And again, they don't get to decide when they kill themselves. The state decides.
Yeah.
And so guards, when they see something like this happening, they have to go in and resuscitate them.
Yeah.
Sometimes cellmates, just to fuck around with guards, they will pretend like they hung themselves. And then a guard comes in. And if the guards have not taken precautionary measures beforehand, it could be very dangerous for the guards because they could be hiding a weapon and attack the guards.
Yeah.
So what they do is they shoot the body to clear the area. So they have some really painful, like it's not bullets that they use, but it's something else that's really painful. Like I forget what it's called, but like sand or something.
Okay.
Can tear the flesh right off of your body.
Like a pellet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so guards clear the area, find out he's still unresponsive. They take him down and try to resuscitate him. And they are successful in resuscitating him. But he is taken to the infirmary and he's in a coma for a little while.
This has taken so many turns
I know.
already.
It's wild.
Okay. That's insane.
Yeah. So he was comatose but woke up in the infirmary. Sources say that he must have seen what's waiting for him on the other side because from that moment on, after he woke up, he was terrified of everything. His behavior became erratic. He was scared of his own shadow. He was also very aggressive with officers. And to protect the guards, Roberto had to wear a mesh mask covering his face to prevent him from spitting, as well as being strapped into a wheelchair for court appearances. He was always screaming profanities at the guards and falsely accusing them of mistreatment, including breaking his neck and backbones, even though there was no evidence of any broken bones or mistreatment. And at this point, no one knows whether Roberto was actually insane or if he was just faking it. And if he was faking it, why? At this point, what was his end goal?
Yeah.
His lawyers argued his mental deterioration, but two psychiatrists and a neuropsychologist determined that he was competent.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So amidst all of the behavior, he's still deemed competent.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure about this, but one of my theories is in prison, you have a lot of liberties taken away. And this is something that we're going to talk about later, but inmates in the state of Utah, part of the death row program called the Last Chance program, they are actually treated with more liberties and treated better than some of the best inmates at the prison. So we'll get into that. But I don't know also like if he was trying to also pretend that he's crazy, because then like I wonder if he caught wind of what if he did get better treatment in mental health area, if he was just like admitted to a hospital at that point. I haven't looked into that, but I'm not sure. I have no idea what his reasoning was at this point. Those are just theories I have.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's for sure a variety of things that could have happened there, and with that Last Chance program, what he perceived as like his best option. And again, it just seems like he's kind of vying for control in whatever way he can grab it at this point. Taking your own life even in that way seems like a form of kind of taking over control of your circumstances.
Eventually, Roberto would turn to eating his feces. And this is where, again, is he insane or not? And I don't, because like, was this an attempt to prove he was insane? So the food that is given to inmates is wrapped in cellophane. Roberto would eat his food, defecate, then wrap his feces inside the cellophane into tiny balls, and then he would ingest it. So he's not just like going around eating his poop. Like this is very calculated and strategic.
Yeah.
Right?
He's eating, so he's balling it up and
he's
eating.
Balling it up.
Interesting form of taking your vitamins. After you've like already pooped him out.
Like, yeah, like what? This was very bizarre behavior. He's ingesting all of this. One evening on routine patrol, officers noticed Roberto had glassy eyes and was unusually subdued. He was taken to the prison infirmary. His death came quickly. 1705, inmate Arguelles unresponsive. 1710, called for an ambulance. 1727, pronounced dead. Over time, the cellophane-wrapped feces had created an intestinal blockage, and when they exploded, the feces leaked into the rest of his body, causing an infection. Cause of death was written officially as natural causes, but the real cause of death was sepsis.
Oh.
He spent 11 years in prison, was paroled, spent 5 more years, then ended up dying. What should have been life in prison and then death for his violent crimes was a mere 16 years. When he was still alive, at one point in court for the murder of Lisa Martinez, the girl that was gruesomely stabbed over 40 times with a wood chisel, the one who was trying to put up a fight. Her mother, Lorraine Martinez, a 5'2" tall woman, lunged at Roberto, screaming expletives and scratching at his face. No one pursued assault charges. When he died, Lorraine said, "I can't believe he just passed away. It was like nothing. I wish he could have lived longer and suffered more." Today, we honor the people that were victimized: Margot Bond, Stephanie Blundell, Tuesday Roberts, Lisa Martinez, and the other children that he had mistreated. May they and their families rest in peace. That's what I have for you today.
Wow. That's such a complex story. I don't even know how to, legitimately, I don't even know how to approach, like, kind of making sense of that in my mind. Just because so many different things happened. What's really awful about that situation that I can see is there's obviously this man who is committing these awful crimes, who is not receiving potentially necessary consequences, not potentially necessary consequences, but retribution in the form of his consequences, and then just going on and committing more crimes as nothing else is happening to him. Like, there's no stop at any point for him.
Let's talk about the Last Chance program in the state of Utah. There are some pretty frustrating things that I've learned.
Yeah.
I'm not a professional on it, and it is hard to find legitimate documents on it. So the sources that I have, they wish to remain anonymous, but I will try to speak on what I do know, what I've been told. So normal inmates are categorized. I believe, like, they have a letter, depending on how good their behavior is, meaning how many, like, freedoms they can enjoy in prison. So these freedoms might be like time outside or time watching TV or more commissary items, which could include like candy bars or something like that. And so if one is a really crappy inmate, prisoner, then they are level A.
Okay.
But if they are on really, really good behavior, and, you know, then the levels go up. So the highest, most privileges are level K.
Okay.
So that's how that's categorized. Now, death row inmates have their own category and their own privileges. And that category is category Z. What's frustrating about this is they get more privileges than the inmates in category K. So people that have not been sentenced to death row, whatever crimes they may have been committed, death row inmates get more privileges, more commissary items. They can dress up in really fancy clothes and take pictures for their families. They can have food ordered into the prison, I think, like once a year, like anywhere that they want to eat. So they can just have like Panda Express, you know, that they want in the prison. They get their candy bars, they get TV time, they get their own cell. And so sometimes, like, people, you know, you just want your own space. I think if people knew what their tax dollars were going to, because it costs 3 times the amount to have someone on death row than like a normal inmate, knowing that they have more privileges in prison than the other people. And it makes me wonder a little bit if Roberto was being strategic, now this is again just a speculation, if he was being strategic because he had spent 11 years previously incarcerated, and then whenever he knew he was going to go back, he's like, well, if I'm going to go back, might as well be on death row.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was strategic when he first started talking about the people that he killed. Maybe he realizes like, hey, they get way more privileges. Maybe I start talking about what I did, confess, and he goes in just like full force. I want to be on death row. There's a quote from one person that I know who has been in prison who says something like, people who've been in prison, like the only people who are not scared to go to prison are people like who have been in prison,
who've been there,
who already know what it's like.
Exactly. I have close family members who've been incarcerated in different locations, and it's the same thing, whether it's to get clean, which happens a lot, which is a completely different story, or it's to just have resources, have a bed, have some sense of structure. They're willing to go back. And especially if I could definitely see he gets in there, he sees who gets the best treatment, who gets the most resources, who gets the best stuff and like daily life. If that's something that he started boasting about because, well, fuck it. If this is where I'm going to be, I may as well live the best life I can in here, which is a really confusing and conflicting thing given the way our country is run, because culturally, and this is something that, you know, when you told me we were going to be talking about the Last Chance program, there's a book by Anne Marie Cusack. So she's an American journalist. She's got a background in anthropology, and her main focus is discussing the culture of incarceration and capital punishment and different varieties of punishment. And a lot of her work goes into the like socioeconomic differences and culturally who we tend to incarcerate more often. But she talks about this concept of like retribution versus rehabilitation. And when you're talking about somebody who's committed these kinds of crimes, we talk such big game in America culturally about retribution, about cracking down hard on crime and, oh, we're gonna take care of these things and we're gonna get retribution for these families. But then you have a program like Last Chance where these people are potentially in lower security areas and then receiving huge amounts of resources. This is something I realized when I was doing my research on just the Last Chance program, because again, like you said, there's not a lot of documentation on it. I couldn't find barely any information, and they don't go into details. But there was another podcast that back in, I want to say it was 2019, who had gotten some insider information onto the Last Chance program, and none of the families who were victims of these people who are in death row, none of them are informed when they leave when they enter lower security areas. And so there was another situation where a bunch of these people had escaped because they went from maximum security and then received better privileges, lower security levels, and then escaped. This one guy started excavating a portion of a truck because he had access to that and escaped the prison through the truck. And the families, the justice that they think is being had for the victims, for their family members, they're not receiving at all. Yeah, it's wild.
It's awful. I think it was in 2020 when that started happening in the state of Utah, when they started to incorporate maximum security into the like less security areas, and so you have death row inmates that are mingling around. What we saw in 2020 was the end of death row essentially in the state of Utah. They're continuing to give more privileges, and like you said, the victims and their families, when this was happening, they were not notified. There is some like really cruel injustice to that. There are several different layers about this whole situation. At the end of the day, I heard this, and I think that this is very true. Right now, prison is just a warehouse. I'm making this podcast in the state of Utah because hopefully this brings some awareness to what's happening as far as like being able to have a voice politically. There definitely needs to be restructuring the victims and their families do need to be clued in on these decisions that are happening. Those are some of my thoughts at the end of that, but it's all just very unfortunate, I think.
I think it's really good to bring, especially the intention to learn and expound knowledge. And I think the intention of this podcast to share information, especially about Utah and its criminal justice system and the way that it functions. Again, like I've had family members who've experienced it firsthand, and understanding the way that we go about, whether it is, again, rehabilitating, is that the right word?
Rehabilitating?
Rehabilitating. Yes.
Yeah.
Whether it's rehabilitating or providing retribution for these families, like we definitely need to be involved and also educated on what our state is doing and how we're functioning as a government system who does have a monopoly on life, because whether or not we like it, that's how governments work, right? Yep. They own our lives. Again, they owned Roberto's life, and he tried to take control over that, but that is something we need to kind of deconstruct and understand a little bit better so we can function better societally and understand how to help people who need help and provide justice for those who also need justice. The way the criminal justice system functions now isn't that much different, and there have been changes, but we need to be aware of them, and especially with policy or procedure or, the things that are going on within our government system, we should definitely be aware of them.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I was happy to have you. How did you like the story?
I didn't like the ending. Again, you've named this podcast perfectly.
Thank you.
Very choice. There's no other way to finish up a story like this other than I didn't like it, how it ended.
Well, we have a fascination with true crime. The stories are really hard.
Yeah.
And they're important.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we can use this as a discussion point to make a better future for ourselves. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the I Didn't Like the Ending podcast. If you liked today's episode, please give a thumbs up. If you're listening on YouTube, a subscription would be great. If you're listening on any of the streaming services like Apple or Spotify, please give a good review. If you found this story fascinating, it just always helps to support our little passion project.
Support Sara. Support the I Didn't Like the Ending podcast.
Well, thanks again for coming, and we will be seeing you in the next couple of weeks with another episode on I Didn't Like the Ending. Have an amazing day.
See you guys.